In the quiet suburbs of Beaverton, Oregon, the Bennett family appeared to be the embodiment of the American dream. A tidy 2-story house, a neatly trimmed lawn shaded by maple trees, and family dinners around the table each evening. But beneath that polished exterior lay a quiet injustice one only Mia Bennett, the family's eldest child, truly understood. Even as a child, Mia learned not to expect too much. At 7, she painted her first watercolor of her family for the school art contest. She proudly brought home a second-place ribbon, her eyes shining. But on the day of the award ceremony, her parents Douglas and Ellen weren't there. They were at Chase's Little League game. Chase's participation trophies lined the living room shelves, while Mia's award ended up forgotten in a dusty drawer. "You know Chase needs more encouragement," her mother would say gently but firmly. "You're so independent, Mia. You'll be just fine." From that moment, Mia understood the unspoken rule: Chase always came first. His birthdays were events, custom cakes, hired entertainers, a crowd of friends. Hers, a dinner at a chain restaurant, often squeezed between errands like grocery shopping. At 13, Mia started babysitting for neighbors, saving every spare dollar. Meanwhile, Chase received a weekly allowance just for existing. Mia asked for an art class, but was told it was too expensive. Weeks later, her parents bought Chase brand new hockey gear without a second thought. By the time they turned 16, the difference was undeniable. Chase got a used but decent Honda. Mia got a bus schedule and a lecture on the value of independence. She worked weekends and summers to buy a rusted-out Toyota with no AC and squeaky brakes. Still, she pushed herself in school, near-perfect GPA design clubs, and dreams of attending a top design school. But once again, her future was sacrificed. Her college fund had been emptied to fund Chase's first startup, a craft beer rating app that never made it past beta. For Mia, the injustice wasn't just financial. It was the crushing feeling of being overlooked in her own home. She grew quieter, not because she didn't care, but because she had learned no matter how hard she tried, the praise was always saved for someone else. 4 years after leaving home at 19, Mia Bennett's life had settled into a grueling routine. Each morning, while Portland still slumbered under its misty dawn, she clocked in at Timberline Roasters, a cozy local coffee shop where she worked as a barista. By afternoon, she changed uniforms and raced across town to begin her evening shift at Tony's Pizza Shack, delivering pizzas until midnight. Her days stretched from 4:30 a.m. until well past 1:00 a.m. just to scrape by. The small apartment she shared with a roommate sat in a neighborhood optimistically labeled as up-and-coming, a euphemism for crumbling infrastructure and petty crime. The elevator had been broken for months, the hot water was unreliable, and neighbors often fought loud enough to wake her at 2 a.m. Still, Mia stayed not because it was comfortable, but because it was hers. Her own freedom, however, flawed. Her closest friend Avery also worked at the coffee shop. With her teal-dyed pixie cut and constellation of ear piercings, Avery had a sarcastic comment for every morning. "You sleep standing up again, Mia." "What is sleep?" Mia would reply, managing a dry smile through blurry eyes. Each month, after rent, utilities, car insurance, student loan payments, and food, Mia had about $47 to spare. One surprise, like a flat tire or prescription, meant skipping meals or dipping into her meager emergency fund, which never grew past $300. And yet she held on to her dream. Late at night after deliveries, Mia would fire up her aging laptop and design logos, menus, and Etsy shop banners for local clients. Her modest portfolio wasn't about fame. It was about reminding herself that her skills still mattered, that she wasn't born just to deliver pizza in the rain. Her dream of launching a graphic design studio remained her silent North Star. Once she applied for a small business loan. The banker glanced at her file and shook his head gently. Your work shows promise, he said, but your debt-to-income ratio is too high and there's no business history. She left the bank in quiet defeat. That evening, scrolling through Instagram, she saw a photo of Chase standing beside a brand new car funded by their parents. The caption read, "Hard work pays off." Blessed, yeah, hustle hard. Mia let out a dry laugh, sharp and silent. Not because it was funny, but because bitterness had become a weight pressing on her chest. She had been hustling for years, but no one called that success. A few nights later, while driving deliveries, her phone rang. It was her mother. "Mia, sweetheart, Chase is having some cash flow issues. Do you think you could loan him $500 just until he meets with new investors?" Mia nearly swerved off the road. "Mom, I'm working 2 jobs and can barely afford an oil change." "Well, if you came to family dinners more often, you'd know we invested everything into Chase's company," her mother said with a subtle edge of blame. After hanging up, Mia pulled into an empty parking lot and cried. Not a few gentle tears, but raw, shaking sobs. She had reached her breaking point physically, emotionally, financially. Her dream of design felt like a mirage growing fainter between cardboard pizza boxes and unwashed coffee mugs. That night, Portland seemed furious, hurling buckets of rain onto the streets, as if trying to wash the week away. Mia's final pizza delivery took her to the wealthy West Hills neighborhood, where manicured hedges, iron gates, and glowing porch lights looked like something from a holiday movie. She arrived soaked. 4 large pizzas teetered beneath her battered umbrella. Her coat was drenched, shoes squishing with every step. At the door, a guy in a backward cap holding a beer opened with a lazy grin. "Pizza's here," he yelled over his shoulder. A voice from inside called, "Make her wait in the rain while we find plates," followed by raucous laughter. $78.50, Mia said, keeping her voice steady. The guy dropped a few bills and handed her $80. "Keep the change," he slurred, $1.50 for 4 pizzas in a downpour. She muttered a strained thanks, turned and walked back to her car, water now dripping from her collar. Just as her hand touched the door handle, a voice called out behind her, Mia Bennett." She turned, squinting through the downpour. A tall man stood under a sleek black umbrella. He stepped into the glow of a street lamp. It was Uncle Eric, the man who had disappeared from her life nearly a decade ago. Time had softened his features silver at the temple's deeper lines, but unmistakably her father's older brother. The one her family never spoke of except in low, bitter tones. "Uncle Eric," she said, stunned. He nodded. "It's me." He moved forward, holding the umbrella over her. "You're delivering pizza." There was no judgment in his voice, only concern. It nearly broke her. "Yes." "My second job," she said, trying to sound casual. "What are you doing here?" "My company sponsored a charity event at this house. I stepped out for air and saw you walking up." They stood in the silence of the rain, words unspoken, hanging between them. "You're soaked," he said gently. "Are you done for the night?" "Yeah, that was the last one." "Would you consider grabbing coffee? There's a 24-hour diner nearby. I'd love to catch up." Mia hesitated. Years of family silence, of warnings about Uncle Eric, echoed in her mind. But there was something in his face, genuine warmth, no agenda that made her nod. "Just 20 minutes, she said quietly. "Let me call my manager." 30 minutes later, they sat at a corner booth in the Maple Diner. Eric had given her a dry sweater from his car, and a mug of hot cocoa warmed her chilled fingers. "Last time I saw you, you were a kid who loved purple and doodled constantly," he smiled. Now I work 2 jobs, have student debt, and a half-buried dream of becoming a designer," she replied. Not exactly glamorous. He didn't interrupt, didn't pity her. He listened. And when she finished about the lost college fund, the exhaustion, the feeling of being invisible, he said simply, "You shouldn't have to live like this. I remember your talent. You still have it. If you're open to it, I can connect you with my design team." He slid a business card across the table. Mia stared at it, this slim rectangle of possibility, and for the first time in years, hope crept into her chest like morning light after a storm. The next morning, while the city still stirred awake, Mia sat in front of her aging laptop, staring at the business card Eric had given her Summit Creative Group, Eric Bennett, founder and CEO. One side held the exhaustion of soggy pizza deliveries, the other, a fragile thread of hope. She took a deep breath and dialed. Within 10 minutes, Eric's assistant picked up. "Mr. Bennett said he hoped to hear from you." The woman's voice was warm. "He'd like to invite you to the office tomorrow for an informational meeting with our creative director, Talia Monroe." Job interview, Mia asked cautiously. "Not exactly," the assistant replied. "Just a conversation about our design needs and a look at your portfolio." That night, Mia didn't sleep. She combed through every project she'd ever done, picking her strongest work logos for a local bakery, branding concepts for Etsy sellers' simple websites. No prestigious degree, but every pixel was hers, built from scratch between shifts. The next morning, she walked into the glass-clad offices of Summit Creative. Natural light, minimalist decor, quiet efficiency, everything about the place whispered success. Eric greeted her with a brief smile and walked her to a glass-walled conference room where Talia Monroe waited. Talia didn't smile. No warm handshake. Just a cool, assessing glance over her rectangular glasses. "So, Douglas's daughter," she said flatly. "Yes," Mia nodded. "But I'm here as myself." Talia tilted her head slightly. "We'll see if that's enough." What was supposed to be an informal meeting quickly turned into a full-on interview. Talia flipped through Mia's portfolio, asking sharp technical questions. Why this color palette? What's the rationale behind this layout? What message were you trying to convey? No empty praise, no polite nods, just critique, direct and honest. Yet somehow Mia didn't feel dismissed. For the first time, she felt seen, evaluated as someone who might actually belong. At the end, Talia closed the portfolio. "We have a 3-month internship program," she said. "Paid not generously, but enough to get by. If you perform, we consider full-time roles afterward." An internship, Mia blinked. "Even though my uncle's the CEO," Talia's gaze hardened. "Precisely because of that, you'll have to be better than the rest?" "I don't hire based on family ties," Mia swallowed but nodded. "I'm not asking for privilege. I just want a real chance. Monday, 9 a.m., business casual, come ready to learn." As Mia walked out of the building, the weight on her shoulders seemed a little lighter. Not because she had the job, but because for the first time someone saw her as more than just the overlooked girl in the background. 2 weeks into her internship at Summit Creative, Mia's life had taken a noticeable shift. She left her apartment each morning dressed professionally, portfolio in hand. The work was intense and the stipend modest, but for the first time in years, she felt herself moving forward. Until everything threatened to unravel. One Friday evening, after a modest solo dinner at a cafe near her office, Mia ran into her brother Chase, seated with his new girlfriend. He called her over, forcing a strained smile before speaking low. "Mia, I need to tell you something. My company's tanking. The investors pulled out. Mom and Dad, they're in serious trouble." She froze. "What do you mean?" "They remortgaged the house, cashed out their retirement. Everything went into this startup," he admitted, eyes cast down. "Now, we might lose the house." That night, sleep escaped her. By morning, she was driving back to the house she'd left at 19. Everything looked different. The lawn was overgrown, the mailbox stuffed with unopened envelopes, curtains drawn like they were hiding shame. Her mother Ellen answered the door, looking older, wearier. Hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing a faded cardigan. "Mia, you didn't call." "I heard what's going on," she said simply. Ellen didn't deny it. Instead, she led her inside and started explaining. Douglas, her father, had been quietly coping with a major pay cut for months, but he said nothing, clinging to appearances. When Chase presented his big chance, they poured in every penny, even borrowing more for one final push. "We believed this time would be different," Ellen whispered. But it wasn't. Mia sat still, emotions clashing inside: pity, anger, heartbreak. When Douglas arrived home and saw Mia, he scowled. "So your golden nephew told you everything, huh?" "I'm your daughter," she said. "I have a right to know." "So you can gloat?" "No," she replied, steady. "So I can decide if there's a way I can help." Ellen interrupted, voice stronger than Mia had ever heard. "Douglas, enough. It's time we face this. I've stayed silent too long while you favored Chase and ignored Mia." Douglas fell quiet. For the first time, Mia saw her mother take a stand. Then Ellen shared a truth Mia had never known. Years ago, Eric had offered to replace the college fund they had spent on Chase's startup. Douglas had refused. "He called it charity," Ellen said, voice shaking. "Said Chase didn't need to owe Eric anything." Mia sat frozen. The man they treated as a villain had in secret tried to protect her. "I need some air," she said quietly, stepping outside. On the porch, she pulled out her phone and dialed. "Uncle Eric, are you free? There's something really important we need to talk about." That evening, Mia met Uncle Eric at a quiet riverside cafe where warm lights shimmered on still water. She laid everything out: the looming foreclosure, the blind investment, and most of all, how he once tried to help her but was shut out. "Are you angry?" Eric asked after a long pause. Mia stared toward the river. "Yes, but I don't want to stay angry forever. I need a way to end the cycle." Eric nodded. "If you're going to help them, you need to set terms. Otherwise, nothing will change." 3 days later, Mia called a family meeting at the old house. No dinner, no small talk, just truth on the table. "I've decided to help," she began. "But this isn't unconditional forgiveness. And I'm not a bank." Her father sat with arms crossed, unreadable. Chase leaned back, sighing. Mia placed a folder on the table. "This is the financial plan. I've worked with a company advisor to build a path. If you reduce expenses, restructure debt, and I contribute short-term support, you can keep the house." "What's the price?" Douglas asked, voice sharp. "3 conditions," Mia replied firmly. 1. The money I provide is a loan with a signed agreement, not a gift. 2. Chase gets a stable job and contributes financially. No more startups funded by other people's money. 3. We attend weekly family therapy, not just to fix the finances, but to fix this family. Silence thickened the air. Chase frowned. "So this is all my fault?" "No," Mia said calmly. "You're the result of bad choices. But if you don't change, then yes, you become the cause." Douglas stood. "Raymond taught you well." "No," she answered quietly. "I taught myself while you left me behind." Ellen placed her hand on the table. "We'll do it." "Mia, I'm sorry for not protecting you from the inequality I knew was happening." Douglas said nothing, but for the first time he didn't fight. He just nodded, as if slowly realizing he no longer held all the power. A week later, Chase started an entry-level job at a marketing firm. Mia provided a documented loan, and every week the 3 of them sat through sessions with a family therapist. The early talks were full of tears and defensiveness, but slowly the long-held silence began to thaw. No one returned to who they once were, and Mia didn't want that. She wasn't trying to fix the past. She was building something new from it. Spring arrived with quiet transformations. The Bennett family, once marked by silence, favoritism, and unresolved pain, began to relearn how to coexist, this time with accountability and intention. Mia continued her work at Summit Creative, no longer the hesitant intern, but now a junior designer in her own right. Under Talia's sharp mentorship and Eric's quiet encouragement, she learned to turn ideas into strategy design, into communication. She still worked occasional weekend shifts at the coffee shop, not for money, but for the grounding comfort of routine. One morning, Avery, the friend who had once been her lifeline, watched her carefully. "You're different now." "How so?" You're more steady. Like you finally fit in the life you're living." Mia smiled. Not because she had it all figured out, but because for the first time she didn't feel misplaced in her own story. Across town, Chase, once defined by excuses and collapses, began learning accountability. The early days of his new job were full of complaints, clueless coworkers, difficult clients, an uptight manager. But months in, something shifted. He was promoted to junior account manager, his first success, not built on parental funding. "Earning something, it just hits different," he said during a rare sibling dinner. Mia didn't reply, just raised her water glass in silent acknowledgement. Their parents, too, were changing. Douglas, once proud to a fault, had sold the luxury car, now drove a second-hand pickup, and listened more than he spoke. Ellen returned to teaching piano lessons for neighborhood kids, not just for income, but to reconnect with a forgotten part of herself. Each week the family sat together in therapy sessions. The early meetings were heavy, like dragging a decade's worth of shadows into the light. But slowly, they began to name things that had long gone unspoken: the favoritism, the fear of abandonment, the crushed aspirations. One evening after a particularly raw session, Douglas surprised them all. "I was wrong," he said, "not just for the favoritism, but for not having the courage to make it right sooner." Mia didn't say a word. But that sentence planted something deep within her, a quiet unlocking of a door that had stayed shut for years. 1 year after that rainy turning point, the Bennett family sat down together, all of them, for Thanksgiving dinner. No one said it aloud, but they all knew this wasn't just a meal. It was a milestone, a chance to reflect, to acknowledge, and if they were brave enough, to forgive. Mia arrived a few minutes late, dressed in a simple cream sweater, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers instead of wine or pie. As she stepped into the living room, the conversation paused, not in tension, but in quiet surprise. Her father, Douglas, sat at the head of the table in his familiar checkered shirt and reserved posture. But there was something different in his eyes. Not authority, but vulnerability. Her mother, Ellen, approached, accepted the flowers, and whispered, "Thank you for coming." Dinner began with the usual staples: turkey, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie. Conversations meandered safely: weatherwork, recipes. No one mentioned Eric, though he was there, seated beside his brother for the first time in over a decade. Then Douglas put down his fork and cleared his throat. The table fell silent. "There's something," he began slowly, "that I think I need to say. In front of everyone." Mia looked up, her heartbeat slowing. Douglas turned to her. His eyes, older, softer, met hers without flinching. "Mia, I was wrong. Not just recently, but for a very long time." The room froze. "I made you feel like you didn't matter. Like you had to swim upstream while your brother floated with a life vest. And worse, I didn't see it even when it was right in front of me." Mia didn't know how to react. Part of her, the child, had longed to hear these words for decades. But the woman she had become no longer needed them to survive. "You've accomplished more than anyone ever expected," Douglas continued. "And I'm proud. Not because you forgave me, but because you lived right even when I was wrong." There was silence. Then Eric tapped the table gently. "Well," he said, smiling faintly, "looks like we finally made it." Mia smiled back, softly. No tears, no dramatics. Just a quiet, grounded sense that finally she'd heard the words she always deserved. A few months after the reunion dinner, Mia received an email from Summit Creative's HR department. The company had just launched an internship program for under-resourced students, and they wanted her to be its first coordinator. She read the message 3 times, not out of doubt, but surprise. For the first time, she wasn't just seen as a promising designer. She was seen as someone capable of leading. On the first day of the program, Mia stood in front of the new interns, her heart fluttering. A brown-haired girl sat in the front row, clutching a notebook tightly, anxiety in her eyes. After introductions, Mia sat beside her. Feeling out of place, she asked gently. The girl nodded. Everyone else seems so confident. I don't think I belong here. Mia smiled, remembering herself not so long ago soaked from the rain delivering pizzas, doubting everything from her skills to her worth. I used to feel the same way, Mia said. But sometimes to belong, all you need is the courage to start and the humility to learn what you don't know yet. Over the following weeks, Mia dedicated time to each intern, not just critiquing designs, but teaching them how to receive feedback, stay organized, and stand strong in the face of rejection. To others, it might have looked like just a mentorship role, but for Mia, it was something deeper, a full circle moment. Once left behind, she now extended her hand to pull others forward. She never hid her story. When the time felt right, Mia shared the road she'd traveled not to impress, but to prove a truth she had lived. The wounds that once brought you down can become the platform from which you lift others up. One evening, as she stayed late organizing her desk, Eric passed by and paused at her door. He watched her in silence for a moment, then said, "Remember when you told me you didn't want charity?" Mia nodded. "I still don't." He smiled. "You don't need it. Because now people look to you not out of pity, but out of belief. You've turned what once broke you into the very strength that holds others up." Mia's first public talk didn't happen in a grand auditorium or a luxury summit. It was a small community event hosted by Summit Creative, where employees shared their career journeys with aspiring students. At first, she thought of declining. Talking about herself had never been her favorite thing. But after some hesitation, she agreed not to be admired, but because she knew if she had once needed someone to speak the words she didn't know how to form, maybe someone now needed to hear them from her. Standing on that small stage facing dozens of young eyes, Mia began with a simple line. "I started with nothing. No name, no network, no privileges. But I had one thing I knew I deserved better than how people treated me." She spoke of juggling 2 jobs to survive delivering pizza in the rain, walking into Summit with a shaky resume and a heart full of doubt. "I'm not telling you this to get sympathy," she said. "I'm telling you because no one gets to decide where you belong except you." After the talk, a student approached her shyly. "Ms. Mia, if I don't have anyone backing me up, can I still make it?" Mia leaned down, meeting his eyes. "If you don't have anyone backing you, then be your own first support." That single line began to spread. A short clip of her response went viral, but what moved Mia the most wasn't the likes or shares. It was the private messages from strangers. "I was about to give up until I heard that. Thank you for saying what I was too afraid to believe about myself." Mia didn't become a celebrity. She didn't need to. What she had was validation from within. She understood now sometimes the people most overlooked are the ones meant to rewrite their roles in this world. Not by waiting for a chance, but by building their own stage. And Mia had done exactly that, not with noise, but with quiet, steady courage.